Hello crafters, today I'm going to show you how I got this cute little sign using Tucker Trade Company chalk paste, unicorn spit gel stain, and some Ikonart stencils. If you want to see how I achieved this look, keep watching. So the first thing I'm going to do is get some artwork in order to make my stencil. I'm just going to use deposit photos. And I'm searching for the word grateful, and then I'm going to only search for vectors, not photos. And the one that I'm using today is going to be this one. And then I'm going to show you how I separated this out into 3 separate stencils. So you just download your art. So this is going to be an EPS file. InkScape can't read EPS files, so what I'm going to have to do is convert this to an SVG file. So I'm just going to open my file in my downloads and drag it to my desktop, and that's the EPS file. And then I'm going to use this website, cloudconvert.com, to convert it from an EPS file to an SVG file. So I'll select my EPS file, and I will convert it to SVG file. And you click convert, and then it converts it for you so that you can open it in Inkscape. So now that I have my SVG file, I can open Inkscape. And I'm just going to go to File, Open, and find my file, SVG file that I want to open, and click OK. So the first thing I'm going to do is set up my document to be the correct size of my inkjet film. So I'm just going to go to File, Document Properties, change this to inches, and I'm actually going to be printing this on our 11 by 17 inkjet film that we have on our website. So I'll just change that, and now my document is set up to be 11 by 17. Alright, so my artboard is 11 by 17 because that's my final size of my printed paper, but my stencil is only 10 by 12. So I want to make sure that all 3 of these can fit on a 10 by 12 stencil. So I'm going to make a 10 by 12 box to put them on. So I'm just going to select my rectangle tool and draw a rectangle, and then I'm going to size it to be the size I want. So I want it to be 10 inches wide by 12 inches tall, and then I'm going to align it to the artboard. So I'm just going to select my Align and Distribute palette, and then under Relative to, I want to make sure it's selected to the page. So now when I hit center, it'll center it exactly on the page right here, and then I'm just going to move it up. Okay, so now I'm going to change the fill and stroke. So in order to do that, I'm going to go to Object, Fill and Stroke, and my color palette will come up. So my fill, I just want to be nothing, and then I'm just going to add a black stroke, so 100% black, and then I'll just make this half of a point. Alright, and now I know exactly what my 10 by 12 inch stencil size will be, so I know where to print my art. And now I'm just going to lock this. So I'm just going to go to Object Properties and click Lock. So now I can't select that box and it won't move, and I can just adjust my artwork. So when I open this file and imported it, it's all grouped together. So basically the first thing I want to do is ungroup it. So now all these pieces are individual pieces rather than a grouping all together, and I can select them individually. So the first thing I'm going to do, let's see, make sure it's about the right size. Might have to make it a little bit smaller so that they all 3 fit. We'll see. So anyways, the first thing I'm going to do is just select all of the black letters in Grateful. And move those away. And then I will just group them together. So now that's just one word. And now I have to select all these roses. And what it selects is anything that you have fully around this. So because I have my box around all the pink areas, it will select that. Where it's touching the green here, because it's not select around all of it, it won't select the green. So I'm just being careful to only select the parts that or only fully select the actual parts of the flower that I want included in my group. And I'm just holding down the Shift key when I want to add to my selection. So I'm just going to group those all together. And now oops, I forgot one. All right, there we go. So now they're all grouped together and I can move them onto their own stencil. And now I'll just group all the leaves together. And we have our colors separated out. So as you can see, there's not quite enough space even on the 10 by 12 sheet. So I'm just going to make these a little bit smaller. So I'm just selecting them, and in order to scale it without distorting it, so right now if I would try to scale this, it would let me distort it. In order to avoid doing that, you just want to hold down your Control key, and now it will only let me scale in proportion. It won't let me distort it. So I'm just going to scale it down a little bit so I can have some more space in between my stencils. And I'm just going to select them all and then go back to my Align palette, and I'm going to center it to the page. And then I'm going to move this group up. And that might still be a little too tight of a squeeze, so I'm just going to scale it down slightly more. And then that gives me enough space around. It should. So now I just want to make sure all my artwork is 100% black. So in order to do that, I'm just going to select my art, go to Fill and Stroke, go back to my Fill, Flat Color, and then I just want this to say 100% black. So if you want to add cut lines to your file, you can. You would just select this pen tool and click where you want your 1 point, and then Control click your 2nd point. We'll keep it in an exact straight line, and then just select it with your selector tool and go back to your Fill and Stroke palette. And your fill, you just want none. Your stroke, again, you're going to want to be 100% black. And then as far as size, I recommend for a cut line to make sure it washes out, maybe a 2-point cut line. You can go down to 1, but a 2-point cut line will wash out better, like between 1 and 2. And I will duplicate it and drag it down. And now I have cut lines between my artwork. So because I am printing on a 11 by 17 sheet, but my stencil is only 10 by 12, if I would want, I could add additional artwork down here just to have it for later if I would have something else to add, or I could just print as is. I like to leave this line on here so I know where to cut my film positive when I'm done, and I can show you what I mean by that. So Inkscape doesn't have a mirror image in its print dialog settings. If your specific printer does, you can do this in the print settings. Some do, some don't. So my setup doesn't. So I'm just going to mirror my artwork by selecting it and choosing this flip selected objects horizontally button. So that just mirrored my artwork. So it's as easy as just one click of the button. So now that my artwork is mirrored, I'm going to go to print. So File, Print, and I am using my Canon Pixma IX6800, and I'm just going to go to Preferences, and I have a preset set up for my Ikonart film positives, so for me it's just as easy as clicking that button. I have a different video where I showed you how to create these presets and exactly what settings I use when I print, so I will link that video below. But in this case, I just need to select my preset and make sure my paper size is correct. I'm printing on 11 by 17, so that's all I need to do there. And then we will print. All right, so take two. I was having issues printing my 11 by 17 out of Inkscape, so I'm just going to save this as a PDF and print it out of Acrobat instead because I just can't get it figured out right now. So again, I'm just going to mirror my artwork and do a file, save as, and I'll just save it as a PDF. As is, and then I'll open my PDF and I'll just print from here instead. I don't know why it was having issues, but it was. So I'm just going to go to Properties, and it looks exactly the same. My print dialog box looks exactly the same out of Acrobat as it did out of Inkscape. So I'm just going to select my preset for that, change my paper size, click OK. Look at my preview, looks good, and print out of here. All right, so now it is printed, and as you can see, it's on a full 11 by 17 sheet. So I'll be able to get a full 10 by 12 stencil out of that. For some reason, when I print it out of Inkscape, I always do a tester on a white sheet first, and it cut off my design, and it wouldn't print. It off-centered it, and did two different tests. I don't know, I couldn't figure it out, so that's why I just saved it as a PDF and printed it out of there instead. And here you can see the artwork is super dark and solid. It doesn't look like modeled at all, or just looks like a solid, dense black artwork. All right, so now I will just cut out my positive along that 10 by 12 border that I had originally made and make my stencil. So my stencils are made, and I gathered all my supplies to make my sign. We have a lot of other videos on how to actually wash out your stencils and dry them, so I'll link one of those videos below. So here I'm just getting my background ready, and I'm using Unicorn Spit Gel Stain in Weathered Gray. And I should have wet the board before I started, but I completely forgot to, so I just did it after. And that just helps the stain kind of soak into the board a little bit better and spread easier around. So I'm just gonna cover the board with stain. And as you can see, I used entirely too much stain. I needed much less than that. So I'm just going to wipe off some of it with an extra cloth. My goal is to have kind of a light gray background that shows some of the wood stain through the gel, or that shows some of the wood grain through the gel stain. So I'm just going to continue to kind of wet this down and wipe it off until it has the look that I am going for. So as you can see now, it's starting to show the wood grain, so I'm just going to dry it with a heat gun. And that's starting to look pretty much exactly how I want it to, so I'm ready to get stenciling. So I'm just gonna cut apart my 3 stencils that I made. And I'm using the blue today because I had some extra that I wanted to use up, but the purple would also work great for this project. It's a little stickier, but with chalk paste, the blue also works really great. So I'm just going to add my first stencil, and you can either huff on it or kind of blot it with a damp paper towel in order to make it a little stickier or activate that adhesive a little more. So I'm just going to line it up where I want, and I'll start with my first color. So today I'm going to be using Tucker Trade Company chalk paste for this sign, and the first color that I'm using is Aqua. These chalk pastes work really great with Ikonart Stencils, and they come with these little kind of spatula scooper thingies, so I'm just going to add some chalk paste to my stencil design and use my Ikonart squeegee to pull it across the stencil. And I just want nice even strokes to pull it across without having to go over too many times to avoid bleed. And then you can just scrape off the extra and add it back to the container to be reused later on. I'm just going to pull off my stencil to reveal my image. And I did have a couple spots that I needed to touch up, and I just go in with a tiny paintbrush and touch them up before I move on to my next color. It's really easy to do that with these chalk pastes as well. All right, now that it looks the way I want, I'm just going to go in with a heat gun, and I want my design to be fully dry before I move on to my next color so that my adhesive on my stencil doesn't pull up my first color while I'm putting on my second color. So again, I'm just going to pat the back of my stencil with a damp paper towel and then line it up where I want it to go. So I'll just smooth the stencil down with my hands until it looks good, and I'll start painting. So again, I'm using a Tucker Trade Company chalk paste, and this is the color Coral. It's really pretty with the aqua and the gray background. I love it. So I just stir it up a little bit to get ready, and then again, same process as with the aqua. I'm just going to add it to my stencil. This one I'm doing from the center out. So I'm just going to add some of my chalk paste, and then again I will spread it out with my Ikonart squeegee. So I'm just kind of starting in the middle and lightly going over the stencil. I want to use a good amount of pressure to get the paste through the stencil, but not so much to buckle the stencil or make the paste go underneath the stencil or anything like that. So I'm just scraping off the extra there, and then I'm going to pull the paste over the remaining part of the image, and a little paste goes a long way. So when you're working with chalk paste, you want to work somewhat quickly. You don't want the paste to dry in the mesh openings, because otherwise when you lift up your stencil, you're going to lift up the paste with your stencil. So just something to keep in mind whenever you're working with chalk paste, that you want to work somewhat quickly. So once you make sure you have all the chalk paste in all the open mesh areas, you can just lift your stencil, and then again I'm going to go in with a heat gun just to make sure this layer is completely dry before moving on to my last layer. So for the word grateful, I am going to use the Tucker Trade Company in bright white to finish off my sign. So again, I'm just going to stir up my paste and add it to my stencil, and this time I'm going to start on the left and just drag it straight across to the right. So I'm holding down my stencil and just giving it good pressure and dragging the paste across my design, same as all the other layers. And again, I just want to make sure I'm getting the paste in all of the open mesh areas. And then I'm going to scrape off the extra here and reveal my finished sign. I just love how this one turned out. It's super cheery, and I love the colors together.